Welcome to Let's Rewatch It Again. I'm Jordan, and there's a burger with a face. Today, we are rewatching Gilmore Girls Season 1, Episode 10, Forgiveness and Stuff. Yes, this is our third Gilmore Girls episode. I told y'all, I rewatch my favorite shows over and over again, and it's December, so I'm hitting up all of my favorite Christmas episodes. This episode catches our girls right on the tail of Rory's first school dance with Dean. The two of them are officially boyfriend and girlfriend, and they accidentally slept on a beanbag chair at Miss Patty's dance studio. Nothing happened. Nothing. Truly nothing happened. However, Emily and Lorelai got into a huge fight upon waking up to find that Rory was still not home at 5:30 in the morning. Then Lorelai and Rory fought, and none of the girls are speaking, and it's time for Emily's annual Christmas party with the infamous apple tarts. Lorelai refuses to go, and in her absence, Richard is rushed to the hospital. Let's jump right into the episode. We're not playing today. We are so ready for the Christmas spirit. Our episode begins with a dress rehearsal for the Christmas pageant. Yes! So we've got all of our great townspeople here. We've got Miss Patty dressed in a fantastic wrap. Like, she has this pashmina thing on, leopard print on one side. The other side is like this deep Christmas berry red. Oh my gosh, I love it. It looks unbelievably cozy. I don't know how Miss Patty does it. She always happens to look stylish, cozy, and classy all at the same time. I have never managed all three of those things at once. I can usually manage cozy. We also have wise men, a shepherd, and half of a donkey. Yeah, there's a guy with a big mustache, and he has the bottom half of the donkey. We don't know where the top half is. In the background, we have a before Mary and an after Mary. And I have to say, after Mary is giving me some serious Emily Blunt from The Devil Wears Prada vibes. She even really looks like her, like very tall, slender, and she looks totally over it. Like, I don't know why this girl decided to be here. Maybe she didn't have anything better to do. I mean, I can't imagine there's too many other things happening in Stars Hollow, but she keeps like blowing on her fingernails like she just painted them 2 seconds ago. I don't know, but before Mary looks unbelievably sweet. And when I say before and after, I clearly mean looks pregnant and does not look pregnant, because before Mary actually is pregnant. We open up the scene a little more and see that Kirk is dressed in a shepherd's garb, and Lorelai is trying to hem his garment, and he keeps complaining that she's going to stick him with one of her pins, even though she has not done it yet, and he's really panicky about it. Lorelai keeps looking over at Rory, who is looking through a massive trunk, trying to find the baby Jesus's missing arm. She tells Taylor that the arm is missing, and he's like, okay, people, the arm is missing. And she's like, maybe it's time we got a new one. I mean, this isn't even a boy baby doll. It has a bow. And he's like, it's a doll. No one can tell. And he says that this baby doll has been used since 1965. Bro, it's just a baby doll. Like, go to Target and get a new one. What is it, like $18? Although now that I'm saying that, I don't know that there is a Target anywhere near Stars Hollow. It's probably at least 30 minutes away. All right, fine. Maybe this is the only baby doll we've got. Taylor tells Rory to keep looking for the missing arm and that they have to find it. This is the baby doll they're using. Then Miss Patty rushes over and tells Taylor that our before Mary is about to become an after. And then she says in a quiet voice, who else in town is knocked up? And we see Lorelai look at Rory, Rory look at Lorelai, and they both sigh. Ew, I do not like this joke. I think it's so out of taste. I know it's supposed to be funny, but I think it's more heartbreaking than anything else to pretend or even imply that Rory might be pregnant after accidentally sleeping on a beanbag with Dean overnight. It's just, I don't know. It's so ick to me. I can't. Also, we as viewers know that nothing happened. We trust Rory. Even if we didn't see what happened, I trust that Rory wouldn't do something like that just willy-nilly. I don't think that she would. They literally became official boyfriend and girlfriend in the cutest, sweetest, innocent way of just talking about it, not even holding hands or anything. So to go from we've barely kissed, barely held hands, only had one dance together to suddenly sleeping together, I don't see it. It's just not going to happen. Lorelai and Rory leave the rehearsal together and they're barely speaking. I mean, they barely utter words about the missing arm of the baby Jesus. And we actually end this scene in a little bit lighter of a note with a dog walking by with the baby Jesus arm in his mouth. Now, that feels better. After our theme song and title sequence, we get a beautiful view of the gazebo and town square as Lane is rushing to meet Rory in the gazebo where they have gathered together to talk about Christmas presents. Dang it, I love Lane. She's so cute. She has on these adorable earmuffs and a really cute like reindeer sweater action going on. I also like the idea of Lane wearing earmuffs because it reminds us of like really big headphones. And hello, she's a music girl. It all makes sense. Of course, she would love a good pair of earmuffs. Meanwhile, in this scene, we have got to talk about how awful Rory's hair looks. I cannot. She has this weird side ponytail that is sticking far too out to the side with a very bright white hairband that is messily holding her hair together. And it looks so accidental, as if she meant to have a low pony down her neck, like a little colonial boy. But instead, we have this weird, like, off to the side. Oh, it's so droopy and just stuck out. I can't, it's so messy. And it looks super odd. It almost looks like she meant to have pigtails and then just forgot to put one on the other side. I don't understand. We never see her hair like this again. I almost wonder if like maybe we rushed the actor into the scene. Something must have arisen here for this very strange hairdo. I just don't like it. Other than that, she's wearing an adorable corduroy brown jacket with the little like white faux fur collar, which I always love. I think it looks super cute. Her scarf is striped. It's not terrible, but it also doesn't match her outfit. And I'm just going to go ahead and say all of these things together. This feels like I am in a fight with my mom and possibly my boyfriend and my grandmother, and I just can't even get dressed. I'm so in a disarray. Rory admits to Lane that things are not going well at their house, that her and her mom are barely speaking, that Lorelai and Emily are barely speaking, and now Dean has the nickname of Narcolepsy Boy, and she hasn't even spoken to Dean since it happened. That is not good. Let's say maybe a week has passed since the incident. That is so long in teenager days, especially when you don't go to the same school, so you can't even glance at each other in the halls. Like, heartbreaking. Then the girls decide to switch topics and discuss Christmas gifts. Rory got Suki a mooing cow-shaped timer, cardio salsa tapes for Michelle, hilarious, and a book for Dean. And Lane is like, a book. And she's like, yeah, Metamorphosis. And Lane is like, romantic. And she's like, it's Kafka. I think it is romantic. And Lane's like, here's the thing. You have to think about what this gift means to the person you're giving it to, not just what it means to you. And she's right. Gift giving is serious business. Lane claims that a book sends the wrong message and that it has to be romantic because they're dating now, official boyfriend and girlfriend. Then she gives the example of giving her own mother perfume because she believes that her mom deserves something fancy. She does a lot of hard work, and this is something nice for you. Now, unfortunately, Mrs. Kim took this to mean this is sex juice that I'm going to use to lure in boys, and then sent Lane to Korean Bible camp. And then Lane says, just imagine that you gave something really romantic to Dean, and then he gives you a football. So what you're saying is, I really like you, and his present is saying, hey man, I just want to be friends. And so Rory's like, okay, so you're saying a book is, and then Lane nods and says, a Czechoslovakian football. And then Lane says the thing that always drives me up the wall. You have to find out what that person is getting you, and then you plan your gift accordingly. Okay, well, if everyone does this, then no one has gotten a gift. Because if you're waiting to see what the other person got, and the other person is doing the same thing, there are no gifts. And you still don't know what to do. I can't. Gift giving stresses me out as well. Any day of the year, I can spontaneously get something I know that someone will love. But as soon as you apply pressure of a birthday or Christmas, I have no idea what to do. I'm all out of ideas. And I end up just walking around Target or searching through Amazon, trying to figure out what to do with my life. And how can I tell the people in my life that I love and care about them in a monetary sense? It's terrible. At the Independence Inn, Michelle is giving a maintenance man a very hard time about decorating this incredible Christmas tree. The Independence Inn is decked out in everything Christmas, green garland, beautiful gold Christmas lights, stunning red poinsettias. Oh, it looks so warm and inviting. I would definitely love a Christmas at the Independence Inn, no question. And he tells the maintenance man that he needs to flip the elf fairy, the one with the wand. And the poor maintenance man has no idea which one is which. And he grabs a shepherd. Michelle claims that that's Little Bo Peep, and he is not going to help him find the right one. Maintenance man has to figure it out himself. Our camera follows a bellboy dressed in all red as we sweep around to find Lorelai at the desk. She's sitting with a gorgeous red poinsettia. I mean, these poinsettias are everywhere, all over our episode. And I think this is one of those things where we're like, oh, it's a Christmas flower. And then you start to realize how many flowers are really showcased inside Gilmore Girls episodes. It's so subtle and soft and such a feminine way of designing a set that we don't even notice how beautiful it is. I mean, we always have flowers at the house, at Emily's house. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's just flowers everywhere and we just don't even notice. It's so subtle. But when we've got Christmas flowers, it's a little more noticeable. Now, Lorelai is wearing a beautiful silk button down with like this fuchsia, almost like burgundy, swirly print, almost paisley. I love it. It looks really classy, but in a way that is both cool and can be layered on top with like warmer sweaters that you can take away and then you still feel nice inside with the heater blazing. As someone who's really sensitive to heaters, this is exactly the type of top that I would like to wear. The phone rings and it's Emily, and she wants to talk about the Christmas dinner. And Lorelai's like, oh, right. And Emily's like, oh, you forgot. And Lorelai's like, well, your Christmas shindig is not high on my list. Ooh, bad start. Do not call something that Emily is planning a shindig. And Emily says, well, I'm sorry that the world does not always revolve around you. Then Emily says that cocktails are at 6, dinner's at 8. And Lorelai claims that she can't be there for cocktails because she has to work. Emily is very upset by this, like, you can't leave early for work for a Christmas party. And Lorelai says, no, it's not in my job description. And Emily's like, well, then don't come. Just send Rory. What? And Lorelai says, you're telling me not to come to the Christmas party? And Emily says, well, you're obviously too busy. And Lorelai brings up a moment from their past. She says, I had the German measles in the 5th grade, and I still had to show up for the Christmas party. And Emily says, let's be honest here. I'm not too happy with you, and I assume you're not happy with me. And Lorelai just keeps going. She's like, my polka dot dress matched my face, and I still had to sit through all 12 courses. My God, that is a lot. That is so many courses. And Emily says that she's tired of forcing Lorelai to do all these terrible things that infringe upon her life. And she doesn't have the energy to pretend that the way that Lorelai treated her was in any way acceptable. And then Lorelai says it point blank, so you're uninviting me to Christmas dinner. And Emily agrees. Yes, I am. Oh, she throws down the phone and is visibly agitated as she like kind of taps on the counter and walks away. And the small button to end this scene, a button means it's like a last little chink of a scene that may or may not pertain to the actual plot of the scene itself, is that the maintenance man still can't find the elf fairy on the tree, and Michelle is still insistent that it needs to be moved. And it's just a small, light way for us to end the scene without feeling too discouraged about the rest of our episode. The next evening, we're at Lorelai's house, and Rory is trying to get her to change her mind. And Lorelai says, it's not my mind that needs to be changed. And Rory is insistent that she doesn't think that Emily meant for her not to come to Christmas dinner. And Lorelai's like, oh, yes, she did. And Rory says, so you just want to hold a grudge. And Lorelai says, yes, it burns more calories. How do you think your grandmother got those amazing legs of yours? She's not exactly a Stairmaster girl. We're going to pause really quick and look at the scene blocking that we have going on here with Lorelai. She's sitting on the couch. Behind her are these beautiful lace curtains, which I really love. It's such a soft, feminine way of decorating the window while still giving us very like wintry vibes because it's a white lace curtain. Beside it is our iconic monkey lamp with a purple shade. And then on the couch itself, behind Lorelai, is a purple throw blanket, which really brings all of the colors together. Lorelai herself is wearing green, and at the bottom of our blocking, we have all these red apples lined up. It's just such a smart way of pulling colors together and still creating a contrast with how she's feeling and bringing that in with the colors and the styling of her clothing into our vision. Meanwhile, Rory is wearing a gorgeous velvet red dress with like yellow, gold, and green floral. But the floral is very like soft and muted against the red velvet. And then she's, of course, it's the early 2000s. She's wearing a choker necklace. Rory's hair looks so much better in this scene. She's wearing it parted down the middle with a barrette holding her hair back from her temples on either side. And it's one of the styles that to me says exactly Rory. Lorelai continues to harp on that she's never seen her mom running on a track or going to a Taibo class. And Rory's like, all right, fine, forget it. We're done here. And then she says, do you want me to sign the present for you? And Lorelai says, yes, just sign it. The innkeeper, formerly known as her daughter. Rory comes in with a beautifully wrapped gift and says, I think you're acting a little mature. Lorelai says, I'm not acting. Then Rory asks her about the apple tarts. And Lorelai's like, I can live without the apple tarts. Rory reminds her that she's made up songs with lyrics that contradict that last statement. And Lorelai says, oh, look, you're going to be late, and hands her the keys. And Rory says, fine, I'm going. As she's walking out the door and closing it, Lorelai calls out, and bring me back one of those tarts, and then just slumps against the wall looking very dejected. We arrive at Emily Gilmore's house, and all of her decorating, of course, with the rich brown wood that they always have in their home. Instead of red poinsettias, we have crisp white. I love this choice of set design. It creates a really nice contrast against the rich, deep wood and brings a little more light into the room. Rather than if it was red, everything would look a little more ominous, let's be honest. And Emily herself is dressed in a beautiful red top with like black fur on the collar and at the sleeve trimming. Emily Gilmore does not miss with her outfits. Ask anyone. Rory comes in with a gift and says, it's from me and Mom. And Emily's like, oh, aren't you thoughtful? I'll just put it under the tree. And Rory tries to bring up her mom again by saying, well, Mom actually picked it out. Emily is completely ignoring everything that Rory has to say about Lorelai and just says, do you know Holland Prescott? I met her last year. Holland, look who's here. Now, in the background, we have Richard and a colleague of his named Alan arguing about a man named Henry. And I want us to focus in just a little bit on that because I have a conspiracy theory. Richard is mentioning a proposal that apparently Henry toned down a little. And Richard says that Henry is a toddler. Alan claims that Henry believed that Richard's take was conservative. And then Richard yells out, he's a moron. And Richard is wearing a beautiful tan wool suit jacket, but I love his tartan bow tie. It is everything. Now, let me just say, I said tartan because that is a print. Plaid is actually a fabric. The more you know. Alan tells Richard to be careful because this man may be our boss one day. And Richard is like, that will never happen. Wait, what have you heard? Emily's like, Richard, look who's here. And Alan asks where Lorelai is and then says, probably by the apple tarts, I assume. Emily claims that Lorelai had to work, and Richard does not seem to be aware of this fact, totally on the outside. Has no idea the girls are fighting, I'm sure. Then Richard says that he's going to give Henry a call, and Alan claims that Richard is getting himself all worked up, and Richard says that this company has been run by gentlemen, and he would never revise another man's work without so much as a phone call. He's very upset. Meanwhile, the two women on the couch, who we know one of them is named Holland, are like whispering to each other as if they are like in on something. I don't know why we suddenly shifted the camera to look at them. Maybe just to remind us they're in the scene altogether, but it feels weird, like they are also talking about this Henry person. Emily tries to break in and says, please stop with all the shop talk. We're here to celebrate. And Richard cannot have it. He says he's going to call Henry. And Alan claims it's past midnight in London. And Richard's like, good. Poor Rory is still very distraught about Lorelai. And I'm sure she's trying to figure out a way to get Lorelai to be there or maybe get Emily to like make amends. I don't know. It seems a little bit late if we're already at this party. Emily will have none of it, but Rory keeps talking. She wants to apologize for the other night and says that she messed up and it's all her fault. And Emily claims this is not the time nor the place, and your mother should have taught you that. And Rory says, please don't be mad at her. And Emily says, I'm not mad at anyone. Now go back in and join the party. Okay, clearly, Emily, you're definitely mad at somebody. Come on. Then she hands Rory 2 drinks and says to give one to Gigi on her way back. So now we have another name, Holland and Gigi. Back at Lorelai's, she is calling the pizza place because she ordered pizza an hour ago and it still has not been delivered. We're getting a better picture of the room now. We have a Christmas tree decorated with colored lights because of course Lorelai would do that. Come on. She also has colored lights in the curtains of each window. I love this. It's such a fun way of bringing more color, more celebration into the room, and we've got more red poinsettias. Apparently, Joe on the other end of the line from the pizza place is saying that their delivery van broke down, and Lorelai's like, well, what's the next phase of the delivery saga? And on the Christmas tree, we see a white sign, pretty big, that says no pouting. Interesting. Isn't that what you're doing right now, Lorelai? Then we find out that Joe's brother is delivering pizzas with a Razor scooter, and he hasn't returned to the pizza place to even pick up Lorelai's pizza yet. She hangs up the phone and is like, ugh, what am I going to do now? She's wearing a really cute green sweater that says bowling on it, and I don't know why, but I've always really liked this shirt. She grabs a bag of salad out of the fridge and a bottle of ranch and just dumps the ranch into the bag. And if this doesn't say desperation, I don't know what does. She shakes up the bag and then just starts stabbing at the lettuce with a fork. And it's so perfectly Lorelai. For some reason, this moment lives in my head rent-free. Also, we've got some red and green apples in a red bowl on the table. And just, I love it. Everything in our set design says Christmas. And I love it, even when it's not an outright decoration. Lorelai hears a noise in Rory's room and goes to check it out and finds Dean on the other side of a window tapping at the glass. She snaps up the blind, slides the window up and says, how you doing? He's like, fine. And she asks him, shouldn't you have a squeegee? As if to imply that he should be cleaning the windows. As if they're like in a cartoon and the cartoon would just pretend like, oh, I was just here cleaning windows, nothing else. He says he was just looking for Rory, and Lorelai says, she's not here. I'll tell her you tapped. He's like, thanks. And just as she is about to close the window, and he says, listen, I just wanted to say things got all messed up. And she says, yes, they did. He said, I'm sorry, but nothing happened. And she goes, okay, I have to go. And he says, no. We sat down, we read a book, and then we fell asleep. And Lorelai says, pick a more interesting book next time, and sighs. And I really like this moment of her sighing and kind of leaning back to fold her arms across her chest. She's accepting that this is the truth because both parties separately have given her the same story. They read a book, they fell asleep, nothing happened. And they both are speaking with such conviction. She has to take it as truth. Why would Dean have a reason to come here and lie to her face? That's just not who he is. So then he says, I guess I'm public enemy number 1 with you. And she said, number 1, I don't know. Would you settle for top 5? She claims that she's still hot for the bomber who's living in a cave. I have no idea who that is. But Dean says, just tell me where I stand. And she says, I don't know. All I do know is that my 16-year-old daughter didn't come home one night and she was with you. And again, he says, nothing happened. And she says, I heard. And he says, you can hate me, but I would not let anything happen to her. Lorelai says, you happened to her. And he's like, well, yeah, I know. But, and then Lorelai says, she's 16. That is the same age as when I had Rory. And there it is right there. Rory is now 16 and Lorelai has to live with the fear that her daughter could make the same choices that she did. Whether or not Lorelai loves her life, I'm sure that if asked, she might not do things the exact same way. And she definitely has bigger plans for Rory. And she even says that she wants her to go to Harvard. And Dean says she will. And if she doesn't, it's not going to be because of me. Ooh, I love that line so much. I love that he insists that Rory is definitely going to live a bigger life. And if she doesn't, he's not going to be at fault. He starts to turn to leave and Lorelai says, I don't hate you. And he's like, really? And then she admits that she did imagine 20 ways to remove his head from his body. He's like, yeah, which one looked the best? And she says, hedge clippers, dull ones. And he's like, well, yeah, you wouldn't want it to go quick. And she says, exactly. And just like that, they've made up. We're now back at Town Square with the gazebo all lit up in Christmas lights and tons of red poinsettia. And here's where my conspiracy theory comes in. We've got a small group of people playing bells. They're playing the song The First Noel. And one guy, Henry, keeps coming in on the wrong count. And he looks visibly uncomfortable. He's the guy on the bottom left-hand side. And oh my God, what is this the same person as the guy that Richard is mad at? Why else would you name two characters Henry in the same span of 15 minutes? We see Lorelai walking by in her blue puffy coat and cute little beanie, and she even looks over at the bell players. And yes, we love to have townspeople. We like to have towns moments, but this feels so pointed. Like, is this Henry who supposedly is trying to ruin Richard's life? But also, why? If it's not, then why do we have this random character named Henry in our faces at the same time as we have Richard upset with someone named Henry in his office? Now, I don't know if we were meant to pay attention to the facts of Richard's argument with his colleague or what's happening with his office. Really, what we're supposed to focus on is that Richard is upset and agitated, and that leads to something later on the episode. But after 5 or 6 rewatches, you start to notice that both people are named Henry. And why? Why would you name both people Henry? I don't know. It just seems a little too much of a quinky dink. Lorelai gives one last look over at the bell players as our maestro cuts them off and says that Henry is coming in on the wrong number. Chuck is supposed to ring on 2. He rings on 3. And Chuck is like, what? I thought I was supposed to come in on 1. I mean, wait, yeah, 2. 2 is correct. And then the maestro says, from the top. And again, Henry comes in at the wrong number and says, Henry. I'm sorry. We've said Henry too many times. This is a thing. It's got to be. Finally, we arrive at Luke's diner where everything is white and blue. We've had several locations so far: Emily's house, Lorelai's house, Independence Inn, and now we've got the diner. Each location has had its own room tone of color, and I love that Luke's diner is completely different than the others. His stands out. Now, he's not going to decorate for Christmas the way that everyone else is, so I really like that we brought in this blue tone, maybe a little Hanukkah vibes, possibly Elvis vibes with blue Christmas. I don't know. But I love it because Lorelai is also wearing a blue puffy coat in this scene instead of like a pea coat or like a wool jacket. I think it fits the motif a little bit more. Also, there's a blue mug sitting on the counter. Just another way to pull color into the scene. Luke asks where Rory is and if she's on a date, and Lorelai's like, no. And Luke says, so you forbid her to see the bag boy. And Lorelai says she'd rather not talk about it. And Luke's like, come on, tell me that you forbid her to see the bag boy. I love this so much because Luke is being protective over Rory the way that somebody, Christopher, should be. But of course, Christopher's not there. Luke is. Luke is the dad that Rory has and needs. Lorelai says that she has not forbid Rory to see Dean at all. And Luke is very upset about this. He's like, that kid is trouble. And Luke says that the first time he looked at him, he knew he was trouble. And Lorelai's like, hello, I had to tell you that. And you told me I was crazy. And Luke says, you are crazy, and he is trouble. Lorelai says that Dean is not trouble. He's 6'2", he's beautiful, and he's in love with my daughter. Okay, little side note, Jared Padalecki, who plays Dean, is actually 6'4", but I digress. It's not important. And then Luke says, so he's trouble. And Lorelai agrees. Yeah, big time. Luke says that he's going to get her a burger. And then she asks to see a menu. And he's like, what? You come here every day. Why would you need a menu? And she says, I'm just in the mood for a little something different. So he hands her the menu and she almost seems to not know how to read it. She just kind of opens it and is like staring at the contents. And he's like, seriously? She asks if he has any kind of holiday special or something festive, and he says he might have some Grey Poupon. It's French. Then she admits that her parents' big Christmas celebration is happening tonight. There's good food, amazing apple tarts, big tree. It's the only holiday I actually look forward to going, and this year I'm uninvited. And then Luke goes, why would anyone celebrate Christmas 2 weeks early? Lorelai's like, did you not hear the part about me being uninvited? And then Luke says, to your parents' fake Christmas party? Yeah, And then he says, do you care? And she says, I do, and I don't know why. And then Luke says, you liked going. Rory's there without you. You and Rory aren't getting along right now, and you feel bad at being separated at a time you usually share together. And she goes, wow. Then he says, did I mention you come here every day? She says she'll just have a burger, and he finally goes to make it. Back at Emily and Richard's, Richard is looking very uncomfortable and maybe a little bit sick. He keeps putting his hand to his mouth. He looks like he might be a little sweaty or clammy. And the guests are pretending to compliment Emily on the food as if she made it. And she's like, all right, that's enough teasing. And then Richard says, I would like to know where Henry is at this hour. He's still harping on this, probably gallivanting around London like a bull out to stud. And then he says, how is Henry supposed to negotiate the contract tomorrow if he's been out all hours of the night with some cheap tramp? And then Alan says, knowing Henry, she wasn't cheap. Now, I have to admit, this does not sound like the same guy that we saw playing the bells, but who's to say? Amy Sherman Palladino, we have questions. Or at least I have questions. I don't know that anyone else has connected this ever or thinks that it matters, but I just feel like it does. Emily claims that this is wildly inappropriate conversation at the dinner table, especially in front of a young lady. And poor Richard starts pulling at his bow tie and saying it's unbearably hot in here. One of the women asks, because I'm not sure who's Holland and who is Gigi, but one of the women asks Rory what she'll be doing for the holidays. And Rory says, I'll probably just be hanging out with my mom. And the other woman says, oh, it's such a shame she couldn't come. She's always such a kick. Then Emily says, Lorelai wasn't feeling well, so I suggested she stay home. Then we hear Richard say, it is hot in here. I'm going to lower the thermostat. Then the women are like, well, but wait, I thought you said that Lorelai had to work. And then Emily says, well, she had to work and then she didn't feel well. So either way, she couldn't be here. And Rory is just like, great. Thanks for the lies, obviously. Then Emily notices that Richard has left the table and goes up to get him. And we get an amazing cut to this really interesting looking burger. It's got a Santa hat with ketchup, olives for eyes, a big Santa beard. What is happening? And Lorelai's like, what did you do? And Luke says that she wanted something festive. And she goes, you made me a Santa burger. It has a hat and everything. And he's like, all right, I cut a piece of Wonder Bread, poured on a little ketchup, piped on a little cream cheese. And then she says, no one has ever made me something quite this disgusting before. Thank you. Her cell phone starts ringing and he points at the sign that says no cell phones. And he's like, this isn't just for decoration. And she's like, oh, please. And he says, okay, you're disturbing the other customers. And she goes, oh, really? Should we take a vote? And then she turns around and says, who thinks we shouldn't use cell phones in here? And everybody raises their hands. And she's like, oh, screw democracy. And she tries to answer it, but it's already gone to voicemail. As this is happening, Taylor and a bunch of carolers come in, still singing, and they say that they want to trade a song for hot chocolate. And Luke is like, so you want free hot chocolate? Oh, no, we'll sing for it. Then I give you free hot chocolate. Well, call it what you want. And he says, how about you buy the hot chocolate and go next door and sing for the marshmallows at the grocery store? So Dosey's Market. So he's like, well, go get your own marshmallows. Steal from yourself. Why not? Then we hear Lorelai say, oh my God. And Luke says, shut up, Taylor. What's going on? And he turns back to Lorelai and she says, my father's in the hospital. She tries to stand up. She's still holding the phone. And she says, he collapsed or something. I need to call a cab. I need a phone. Where's the phone? And then she drops her jacket as she tries to put her purse on her shoulder. She's like, oh, I have one. I need a cab. What's the number? It's something cabs or cab something or 1-800-CABS. Like, does anybody know the number of the cab company? And Luke says, I'll drive you. She says, there's food and people and there's a burger with a face. And then Luke says, we're closed. Let's go. Food's on me. Put on your coat. Get your stuff. And then he tells Taylor, have your hot chocolate and then lock up. And then he takes Lorelai's hand and she says, Luke, and she starts to cry a little bit. And he says, I know. Let's go. And she's just like trying to get her puffy coat on as she follows him. And he gently touches her back as he leads her through the back door. And I have to say, that is one of my top favorite Luke and Lorelai moment. It's such a sweet moment of Luke stepping up exactly when she needs someone. When you have a disaster, an emergency, or even just like a small crisis, the people who step up into your life, those are the ones to hang on to. The ones that are like, oh, I really can't get off the couch right now. Good. Leave them on the couch. As they're driving along the highway, apparently Luke is not going fast enough and Lorelai has had it. She keeps trying to check her voicemail and listening to it. And Luke's like, you've checked it 5 times. I've listened to it 2 times. And she's like, Grandpa's in the hospital. Please come. Who taught her to leave a message like that? And Luke is like, I'm sure she was in the hurry. And Lorelai's like, why is he in the hospital? How bad is it? What are the circumstances involving him being in the hospital? These are simple questions. And Luke says, we'll be there very soon. He's staying so calm. And then Lorelai says, what if he's dead? And Luke says, he's not dead. How do you know? I know. Oh, you're suddenly getting visions while you drive at 20 miles an hour in the oldest truck known to man. And then she kind of cuts herself off and says, I'm sorry, you're killing yourself to get me there and I'm yelling at you. I don't mean it. And he just kind of nods and she says, I feel like this is one of those moments where I should be remembering all the great times I had with my dad. The time he took me shopping for a Barbie or to the circus or fishing. And my mind is completely blank. And Luke says, well, I'm sure it happened. No, it didn't. He came home, he read the paper, he went to bed, I snuck out the window. He was a very by the numbers guy, and I was never very good with numbers. And Luke says, I'm sure he loves you. And then Lorelai says, my dad is not a bad guy. He lived his life the way he thought he was supposed to. He followed the rules taught to him by his non-fishing, non-Barbie buying dad. He worked hard, bought a nice house, he provided for my mom. All he asked in return was for his daughter to wear white dresses and go to cotillion and want the same life he had. What a disappointment it must have been for him to get me. And then Luke comes in with the best line possibly in the entire episode and says, I can't imagine anyone seeing you as a disappointment. I think my heart literally just stopped and then beat way faster. Then Lorelai says, I bet you'd buy a Barbie for your daughter. And Luke says that he'd rather give her the cash to buy it herself and then meet her at the baseball card. Lorelai tells him he'd make a great dad. And then Luke says, you make a great mom. And then Lorelai says, it's just the daughter part I don't have down yet. And she looks so upset. And she really thinks her dad might not make it through the night. And Luke says, all right, hold on. That Camaro is dust. And we see him kind of like kick it into gear and take off down the highway. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emily is yelling at this charge nurse who is none other than Sue Sylvester. Okay, that's not her real name, but that is who I see when she's in the room. Come on. She's also the mom from Sleepover, this really ridiculous B movie about teenage girls and the awesomeness of middle school to high school life. Anyways, I digress. Everything that Emily says, the charge nurse just keeps saying, you will, you will. And Emily says, can you just put a proper sentence together? And then finally, the charge nurse says, ma'am, please wait here. Ugh. All right, well, that's not a whole lot better. Then the charge nurse goes through the mysterious double doors that no one can pass through. And Rory comes in and says, did you find out anything? And Emily says, no, they run this place like the CIA. Then a man in a gray wool coat and matching gray scarf comes in and takes Emily's hands in both of his. And she says, Joshua, thank God. And then Joshua says, it's all right. I'm going to go check on him. Have you filled out the forms? No, I want to see my husband. And Joshua turns to Rory and says, is she being obstinate? And Rory says, very. Joshua says that he's going to go see what's going on and we'll take it from there. I don't know who Joshua is, but I'm very glad he's here because Emily definitely needed this man in this moment to take her hands into his and have her breathe. I don't think she's tried that yet. Then Emily says, there he goes. Rory says maybe she should call her mother again. And Emily's like, no, I'm sure she's very busy. Then Emily gives Rory some money to go get a paper for her grandfather, the Wall Street Journal or Barron's. He'll want something to read when he wakes up. Then Rory asks her if she can get her anything. And she says, no, dear, I'm fine. Now, our hospital location is all fluorescent lights, lots of bright white walls, very sterile, very clean, very cold looking. And we only have little bits of red in the background with like paper decorations for Christmas. And then we also have a bright blue construction paper wall for Hanukkah. But it definitely does not feel like the holidays here at the hospital. Emily tries to call Lorelai and we get a little shot of the answering machine at Lorelai's home where everything is dark except for one lamp and the Christmas tree. Because of course, Lorelai isn't at home. She's rushing to the hospital to meet her there. Emily goes back to the desk and finds the charge nurse again. And the charge nurse says, Miss Gilmore, I need you to, it's not Miss Gilmore, it's Mrs. Gilmore. I'm not a Cosmo woman. And the charge nurse says, I know this is difficult, but if you don't fill out, and then Emily stops her and says, you'll do what? I'd like to hear in your most condescending tone what my punishment will be for not filling out these forms. Are there bamboo shoots involved? Some dark, deep hole in the ground? Rats nibbling at my toes?" As she's saying all of this, Luke and Lorelai are bustling through the hallways, trying to find where the blue line leads. And then it just breaks off into a blue dotted line and a blue solid line. And Lorelai is panicking because she doesn't know how to pick one. And Luke is trying to be helpful. And she's like, "How do I not have intuition to find my father? Like, he's right here. There should be like a blood bond or something to lead me to them." And then Luke says, "That's crazy." And then we hear Emily yelling. So, of course, her voice leads us right to them on the other side of the admin desk. And Lorelai and Luke just walk right through the administrative area, which I really don't think they're supposed to do. And Emily's like, "You came." And Lorelai's like, "Of course I did." And Emily claims that this woman keeps asking her annoying questions. The charge nurse says that she needs to get this information. And Emily says, "No, what you need is to get sensitivity training." And then Lorelai says, "What if I could fill out this information and you can go find someone who can tell us how my dad is?" And the nurse is about to disagree. And then Lorelai says, "Or I could go find someone and you can continue to discuss with my mother." And the woman clearly does not want to talk to Emily anymore. And she's like, "You know what? I'll go. Thank you." And Emily's like, "You got rid of her." And Lorelai says, "Yes, now tell me what happened." And Emily is still stuck on that the charge nurse went to go find actual information for her. She's like, "That was amazing. Mom, please." And then Emily says, "I don't know what happened. He was hot. He went to turn down the thermostat. And then, were you on a date?" And she sees Luke and she's like, "You have an escort." "No, it's Luke, Mom." And then Luke says, which is her way of saying we weren't on a date. And then Lorelai says, "I didn't mean it like that." And Emily says, "Well, I mean, seriously, it's Friday night and you show up here with a man. It's not insane to assume a date was involved. Okay, it's entirely possible that I was out on a date." And then Luke says, "Just not with me." And then Lorelai says that she was eating at Luke's when she got the message. "He gave me a ride. Is Dr. Reynolds here?" And Emily says that he was supposed to come back the minute he knew something. And then Lorelai's like, "Well, good, let's go find him." "You can't find him. You can't find anyone. Everyone just keeps disappearing through those doors." And then Lorelai goes, "Fine, let's go through the doors." And then just stomps right through them. Emily's like, "I didn't know you could do that," and just follows after her. And Luke's like, I'm just going to wait here," and sits down. Rory comes up just as he's about to sit down. And he's like, "Hey, I gave your mom a ride. We weren't on a date." Okay. Luke says that Lorelai went back to find a doctor. And Rory's like, "Did they find out anything else about Grandpa?" And Luke tells her, "Give your mom a couple of minutes back there. I bet she finds something out." And Rory says, "Thank you for bringing her." She sits down next to Luke, and I love that Luke is the one that intercepts her instead of Lorelai, because I feel like Rory needed this little moment with him. I know that we don't necessarily or technically call Luke Rory's dad at any point during the series, but isn't he though? He really is. He is the father figure that she has in her life until Richard comes into the picture. And that was so recent. I mean, yes, Rory did see Richard once or twice a year. That doesn't count. Luke is there for her day in, day out, and we see that over and over again. Luke asks Rory if she's okay, and Rory says, "I don't want him to die." And Luke says, "You tell him that when you see him. People like to hear that." And I love that. It's so simple, but like, honestly, yeah, if you were really sick or had a really big tragic accident and someone you love and care about says, "I'm really glad you're still here with me," yes, that is what you want to hear. It's so sweet and simple. Then Lorelai comes back. Her and Rory hug, and Rory's like, "It was horrible. It happened so fast." And Lorelai says, "He's about to come out of the big testing room." And then Rory asks, "Where's Grandma?" And Lorelai says that she's kicking some patient out of the room with a good view. And Rory's like, "Oh." And Lorelai says, "I hope they hurry. Otherwise, he's going without the life support machine." Rory says that she wants to do something like get some coffee or make phone calls or do something that isn't just standing here waiting. And then Lorelai says, "Okay, well, as partial as I am to the phone, I'm voting for the get coffee idea." And Rory asks Luke if he wants anything, and he says peppermint tea. And then Lorelai tells Rory he's going to be fine. And Rory says, "I was just getting to know him. I don't want him to." And Lorelai cuts her off and says, "He's not. Go get your coffee." Rory leaves, and Lorelai sits down next to Luke. And Luke tells her that she was very brave. And she says, "Well, it's my turn. God, this sucks." And then Luke says, "Hey, come on, you got to be positive. Bright side, good thoughts, rainbows, unicorns, clowns, little cute furry Okay, I'm out. And the whole time he's saying this, she's just looking at him like, oh my God. And then she goes, thank God, when he's done. I love these two. I'm sorry, but these two have the best chemistry out of any characters ever. Although, if I'm being honest, Lauren Graham, who plays Lorelai, has the best chemistry with any character, any actor, any actress on the planet possible. It doesn't matter who she's in a scene with. She sparks. Emily comes in and says they've secured a room, but the pillows are completely unacceptable, and she needs to get him some slippers. Meanwhile, a man on a gurney goes by, and Luke looks up at the ceiling and covers his face. And Lorelai's like, oh my God, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm just not real big on hospitals, the smell, people being wheeled by with tubes sticking out of them, draining fluids, gaping holes. And Lorelai's like, why don't you go home? And he immediately looks at her and says, you want me to go? Yeah, you don't look so good. Thanks. That's not what I meant. You always look good. And he's like, oh, really? And she says, I meant you always look healthy, but you don't look so healthy now. You look. And then he says, unhealthy. Oh, what? I said you look good. It's not like we're in 5th grade. You look good. Big deal. And she folds over her lap and then looks at him and he's still smiling. And she's like, ugh, stop staring at me. Man, these two, I tell ya. And then we have a guy in a wheelchair with a head bandage go by. And he's like, oh, and looks up at the ceiling. And she says, see, that's what you get for being cocky. Then 2 men in scrubs wheel Richard by in another gurney. And the man says that he's a little groggy, but you can go with your dad until the doctor comes in. And Lorelai stops in the hallway and she's like, I'm going to go find my mom and Rory. And Luke's like, oh, it's okay. I can tell them. And she says, no, I think they'd like to know now. Then bam, Emily's there. And Lorelai is like, oh, hi, mom. And Emily's like, where were you going? Oh, I was just going to find you. They brought dad up. How is he? Did you talk to him? No, I was coming to find you. Come on. And then Emily starts to walk away. Lorelai says, no, you go ahead. I'm going to go find Rory. And then Luke says, I could go find Rory. No, that's okay. I'm going to do it. And Luke says, I thought so. Oh, hey, look, it's Rory. Rory arriving with 2 cups. And Rory says that the coffee machine was jammed, so she got soup and Pez. Ugh, that sounds terrible. And Lorelai says that she was going to look for Rory, and Rory looks panicked. And then Lorelai says that they just brought up Grandpa. He's in room 202. And Rory's like, great, let's go. And Lorelai says, you go ahead. I just have to make a call. And Rory is very confused by this and says, well, hurry up. Yeah, I'll meet you there. And then Luke goes, now who are you going to go find? And Lorelai's like, oh. And Luke tells her that she can't avoid going into that room forever. And Lorelai's like, I'm not avoiding anything. I am going to find coffee. Luke tells her the machine is jammed. Admit that you're afraid. And she goes, you have no idea what you're talking about, and keeps walking backwards down the hall. And then he's like, the truth hurts. And she says, you know what hurts? A screwdriver in your head. And then she points behind Luke and he turns to find a guy with apparently a screwdriver sticking out of his head. Thank goodness we are not shown this, but by his face, that's definitely what's happening. We cut to Richard's hospital room where Rory is reading him the newspaper and he's actually responding to what she's saying. This is good. He looks like he's going to be okay. Emily comes in with 2 fluffy pillows, and Rory says that they've made it through all of the Wall Street Journal. Now, I have to say, that sounds like we've been in here for several minutes. What has Lorelai been doing? I also want to say that I do think that Luke knows what he's talking about because his own father passed away and was sick. So he's very familiar with the whole, I don't want to see my dad like this. But also he was the one that dealt with it firsthand. I like that he's giving Lorelai a little bit of tough love here. Like, you have to go in there at some point. It's not going to be good, but you still have to go. Emily says that Rory can read the rest of the paper to him later. And Rory asks Richard if she can give him a hug. And he says, oh, pain is part of life. And she gently hugs him. And they have their sweet little moment as she kisses his cheek. And Emily says, I think this little girl likes you. And Richard says, well, she has good taste. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Luke is completely folded over his lap, looking down. Rory's like, where's Mom? Looking for coffee. What are you doing? Staring at my shoes. She tells him to carry on and slowly walks away. Just as he starts to look up, a wheelchair goes by and he snaps his head back down and covers his head with his hands. Now, can I just say, I think it's amazing that Luke is still here. Lorelai told him he could leave and they are not in a relationship right now. He is still here. Lorelai's not even in the hallway and he's still here sitting in the chairs right next to Richard's room. He's not going anywhere. And we know this, we feel it. It's amazing. This man is freaked out by this entire building, can't even look up, and he is still not going anywhere. Lorelai, why were you not on a date with Luke tonight? Come on. Back in Richard's room, Emily is discussing how she tried to find some good pillows and they need better sheets. And Richard is trying to say that they need to talk and that this is serious. And all she can do is just switch out the pillows. And he's trying to explain to her that in his desk drawer, there's a key and that there's a safe and that there's a lot of stock information, plus all the insurance information. And she still is focused on sheets and pillows. And then he says, our will is in my lower drawer. Dennis has a copy. And then she says, maybe I could get, and he says, Emily, this is serious. No, I'm going to have someone get me those sheets. And he says, Emily, please. And she says, no, there may be many things happening in this hospital, but your dying is not one of them. No, I did not sign on to your dying. It is not going to happen, not tonight, not for a very long time. In fact, I demand to go first. Do I make myself clear? And he is shocked by this information, but then says, yes, Emily, you may go first. And she says, good. Now I'm going to get you those sheets. This is exactly what my own mom would do. She would be trying to make sure that everyone was as comfortable as possible with the best stuff as possible, like the best sheets, the softest sheets, the best fluffy pillows, so that no matter what's going on, at least you feel like something is right. Oh, I love it. And it also gives her something physical to do, which is always helpful in these situations. Rory finds her mother trying to wear down a coffee machine by constantly pushing the buttons, and she calls her pathetic. Lorelai's like, is the doctor back yet? No. And then Lorelai says, so you had a visitor tonight, narcolepsy boy. Dean came over. Oh, yeah. He pulled the old tapping on the window bit. Were you mean? Excuse me, I am never mean. And Rory's like, oh, God, you were mean. He told me nothing happened. Nothing did. I know. Rory, there are only two things that I totally trust in this entire world. The fact that I will never be able to understand what Charo is saying, no matter how long she lives in this country, and you. Because, of course, Lorelai can never have just a normal conversation. She has to also joke at the same time. I mean, that is Lorelai. And then Lorelai says, you just have to understand the panic factor that went on. And Rory's like, I do, I really do. And I'm so sorry. Nothing like that will ever happen again, I swear. And Lorelai's like, don't swear. You are your mother's daughter. What does that mean? Things happen even when you don't mean for them to. They will not happen. And then Lorelai chuckles at her and goes, okay. And then Rory says that she hated going to the party tonight without her. And Lorelai agrees, I hated you going to the party without me. How were the apple tarts? Oh, Grandma didn't make them this year. Really? That's weird. And she says, are you lying? Through my teeth. Good girl. We find Luke in the hallway again. This time he's slumped in the chair looking up at the ceiling, a little more of a comfortable pose. And Emily asks if she can sit down, and of course he agrees. She's holding Richard's bow tie in her hands, and she unbuttons the top button of her collar, separating that black faux fur. And Luke asks how he is, and Emily says, oh, I don't know. And then Luke says, that's a nice tie. It's Brooks Brothers. It was bothering him tonight. I told him not to loosen it. I wanted him to look nice for our guests. So he didn't, and then, well, the paramedics took it off him on the way here. I just haven't been able to put it down yet. And as they're speaking, Luke is looking down at her hands as she plays with the tie. And I really love this moment. He's so quiet, just letting her speak and get it all out. He doesn't even know Emily. She barely knows Luke, and yet she's saying all of this to him. Then Emily says that I must sound crazy. And he says, I've kept my father's entire store just the way he left it. Well, I turned it into a diner, but I kept all his stuff on the walls, his pictures in the office, even the hardware sign. And Emily says, I'm sure he would have appreciated having his life's work being honored like that. And Luke says, he would have called me a fool. Oh. And I love that. It's such a cute little way of Emily not understanding, but also Luke being like, no, it's all making sense here. This is just what we do when we think we're losing someone, or we try to hold on and we do the best we can with what we've got. Then Emily says, I don't know what Lorelai's told you about her father. I can certainly imagine, but he's a very good man. He always did the right thing by his family. And Luke nods and says, that's what she told me. And I love that because that is what Lorelai said, that he's a good man and tries to do what's right for his family. And then Emily asks, so what exactly is going on between the two of you? And Luke kind of pulls back a little bit, gets a little shifty in his chair and says, nothing, really. We're friends. That's it. And then Emily says they're idiots, both of them. Then Lorelai and Rory show up and their coffee hunt has produced nothing. And then Luke says, your mother called me an idiot. And Lorelai says, oh, you must have sucked up good. And then Emily says that she's going to wash her face and takes Rory with her. Nothing bugs me more than when a character in a movie, book, or TV show, especially a female character wearing lots of makeup, says that she's going to wash her face in a public bathroom. With what? Water? And then hand soap? Right. Emily Gilmore is going to wash her face with tap water from a public hospital and then wash her face with hand soap, and then pat her face with paper towels. Right. I can't. There's no way you're doing that. I don't understand what they mean. I have never actually seen this go down. Please explain, because then you don't have moisturizer for what I'm sure is going to be a very drying soap or more makeup to then reapply, right? I mean, she didn't have a purse with her. I don't know why this bugs me so much. Probably just because I have dry, sensitive skin, but I just can't handle this thought of a random person just washing their face. What? No, we're going to move on. Lorelai paces in front of the door, slowly getting closer to it. And Luke says, "So what are you going to do?" And she looks at him and sighs. He gives her a look and then nods toward the door. She goes, "Okay, I'm just going to, And then he says, "I'll be here," because he will. He will definitely be there. And she knows he'll be there. She has no doubt. I don't want to talk about Christopher too much, but I just want to say that she never knows if Christopher will be there or stay or disappear. And Luke is so constant. Always. Lorelai walks into the room and quietly shuts the door, hands in her pockets, and she just looks at her father with all of these tubes. And I'm sure she's thinking that he just looks so small and different than any other time in her life in this hospital gown and these fluorescent lights. And he slowly opens his eyes, and just as they're about to say something to one another, Emily walks in and says, "How are you doing?" And who I assume should be the doctor, although he's not wearing a white coat. He's wearing a fancy suit, holding the chart, and says, "You just have a little touch of angina. You need to adjust your diet, start exercising, no red meat, heavy desserts." And Richard is just watching Lorelai take all of this in as the doctor says that golf does not count as exercise. And Rory says, "But he's going to be fine." And yes, as long as he does what he's told, he's going to be fine. Lorelai leaves the room, starting to sniff, and Luke comes sweeping around the corner with a real mug in hand. And Lorelai says, "Yeah, he's going to be fine." And she starts to cry. And Luke holds out his arm and she falls into his chest, leaning her face into his shoulder. And he wraps an arm around her and says, "Okay, so this is where the guy is supposed to give the girl his handkerchief, but I don't have one. And plus, I find the practice a little revolting. So," and she leans back and says, "I'm okay." And he's like, "Are you sure?" And she says, "Yeah." And then looks down and he says, "Well, I got this for you." He hands her the real mug with real coffee in it. She's like, "Where did you get this?" And he says, "Nurse's lounge. You're not the only one who can flirt." And she laughs and he goes, "The door was open." And she takes a full sip and you can just see the calm fall over her. First of all, Luke is there holding her while she cries and then giving her exactly what she needs, the hot nectar of the gods, coffee. And he asks, "Anything I can do?" She says, "Could you take Rory home?" And he says, "What about you?" "I think I'm going to stick around for a while, make sure everything's settled. You take her and I'll drive the Jeep back." And he says, "Okay." And then Rory comes out and says, "He's going to be fine." And then Lorelai says, "Yeah, I think it was those financial papers that really did the trick." And Rory just smiles and tells her that Luke's going to take Rory home and she's going to hang out there for a while. And Rory's like, "No, I'll stay too." "No, go call Dean, spend an hour arguing over who's going to be the prettiest. You are gross. Call you later. Tell him goodbye for me and tell Grandpa I'll come back tomorrow." She says, "Okay, I will." Rory gives Lorelai the keys, and then as they walk, Luke says, "Okay, walk fast and don't look back." As he's joking about the whole nurse's station thing, he is distracting Rory from how she is feeling emotionally, giving her something light, funny to focus on as they walk to the car because they're still walking through the halls of the hospital. So he's a little uncomfortable. So it's like he's distracting himself by also playing with her. I'm sorry, if this is not dad behavior, I don't know what is. Lorelai slumps into the chair with her hot mug of coffee, and Emily finally comes out and sits down beside her. Emily says that he's almost asleep, and Lorelai's like, "Good," and says that Luke is taking Rory home. And Emily says, "What about you?" "Well, I thought I'd stick around in case anybody needed anything." Really? And then Lorelai says, well, not you, obviously, but somebody somewhere in this hospital might need something, and I'm going to be the person who gets it for them. And then Emily asks her if she'd like to go down to the cafeteria. And then Lorelai says, yeah, maybe somebody in the cafeteria will need something. Oh, dear. And won't they feel lucky when they see me? I needed something and you were there. It's going to be a great moment. Now, I want to say on the DVDs, there is a special deleted scene where we actually see them go to the cafeteria together. And as they're sitting down to eat terrible hospital food, Lorelai says, well, you just couldn't let me out of Friday night dinner, huh? Because, of course, it's Friday night and they're having dinner together. We go back to town square and everything is all lit up and decorated for Christmas, even though, as Luke said, it's not for another 2 weeks. Luke is already back in the diner cleaning up after everyone is already gone, of course, because Taylor closed up for him. Luke asks how her dad is and she says better, though he says life is not life without steak. She's wearing a navy blue corduroy jacket with like the faux sheepskin on the inside and on the collar. And this is one of my favorite Lorelai jackets, and I still look for it in stores, even though I know it's not in style. I don't care. It looks cozy and cute, and I want it. Lorelai says, anyway, this is for you, and hands him a gift bag. Just a thank you, Christmas, whatever. And Luke says, Christmas is not for 2 weeks. Do we really have to do this again? He pulls out the tissue and it's a blue baseball cap. She said, I just thought, God forbid, something happens to that one. You might need a spare. She puts it on his head with the bill facing forward, and absolutely not. That is awful. She makes a face and goes, and does that look wrong? She takes it off, turns it backward the way it's meant to be. He adjusts it. And then they turn and say, oh, hey, look, lights. And then Luke says, it's not even the procession. It's just the rehearsal. She said, so it's pretty. And she lifts the blinds and he says, it's the same thing every year. She says, come on, Luke, please. He turns out the light and they stand side by side, both wearing blue, I might add. Luke is wearing a blue plaid shirt and she's wearing her blue shirt with a jacket covering it. And I just love that they're both wearing blue because it unites them together in this scene and also makes it look really pleasing. And she says, it's hard to imagine living somewhere else, isn't it? And he says, thanks for the hat. And she said, you're welcome. Looks good on you. And he looks at her and says, good how? She rolls her eyes and says, just watch the procession. The Christmas tree lights between their heads as they look through the glass window at the beautiful town square, and we have our end credits. Oh my goodness. I have chills every time that happens. I can't. And fun fact, that blue hat will be worn by Luke through several seasons while they are together. And then when they break up, he switches it out for this awful black hat that Lane says looks ominous. As I said, I love a good Christmas episode, especially this one. I don't know if it's all of the red and the green, the mention of apple tarts, whatever it is. I adore it. And I really love the way that Luke steps up for Lorelai and for Rory and even sits with Emily in her time of need. Completely fantastic. Whenever anybody argues about who would you pick, Dean, Logan, or Jess, I always choose Luke. Obvious answer. I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Let's Rewatch It Again. We will be continuing with our Christmas theme with our next episode, but I'm going to leave whatever that is a surprise, mostly because I haven't chosen it yet. If you have any comments, question, reviews, or Christmas episode requests, please send them to me at letsrewatchitagain@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Let's Rewatch It Again. And until next time, I'll catch you on the flippity flip.